Hey, my name is Mike, and this is my presentation on Module 5, discussion the Abolitionist movement. Sorry if you like I'm looking this way. This is where my camera is. It's hard to look at the lens because I like looking at myself while I'm talking. But anyway, I wanted to start off by talking about what abolitionism is and how that led to the abolitionist movement. Abolitionism refers to the belief that slavery is wrong and that it should be put to an end. That led to the abolitionist movement because in the 19th century, many abolitionists were coming together and it started a reform where they wanted to put an end to slavery. They started like people like Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and even in the region, David Walker, William Lloyd Garrison was giving writings and persuading people on why slavery was wrong and why it should be put to an end. After reading the three documents by William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, and David Walker, the first question says, what are their views on the institution of slavery and those who support slavery? As for the documents, they all talk about how slavery is wrong. Of course, everybody knows that. But William Lloyd Garrison, he expounded on the fact that yes, slavery is wrong, and he also expounded on the fact that the people who support slavery were contradicting themselves and how they conducted their laws and like how they conducted their laws and stuff like that. As for saying like here he says, all those laws which are now in force admitting the right of slavery are therefore before God utterly null and void, because as the Constitution states, they are the law comes from God, and that's what they derive the law from, and for them to enslave Africans and bring them to America, is that sin just does that just disappear? You know what I mean? That's what he was expounding on. That's how he felt about it. And as for Frederick Douglass, he's speaking from experience. So it's as I said, Frederick Douglass, he speaks from experience. So his word is very credible in his argument. Where he has a quote where he states that, well, he states a question where he says, what am I to argue that it is wrong to make men brutes, to rob them of their liberty, to work them without wages, to keep them ignorant of their relations to their fellow men, to beat them with sticks, to flay their flesh with the lash, to load their limbs with iron, to hunt them with dogs, to sell them at the auction, to sunder their families, to knock out their teeth, to burn their flesh, to starve them into obedience and submission to their masters. And then he says before this, but it goes with, he says, there is not a man beneath the canopy of heaven that does not know that slavery is wrong for him. Therefore, all three of these men in these documents, they believe that the people who are enforcing slavery or support slavery, they cannot say that they are taking this from God, or, you know what I mean, saying that they're obedient to the Lord, because there's no way that they can enforce slavery with they're stripping the liberty and the rights from these people who've done no harm to them and treat them like animals when they're people just like us. The next question says, how do these men view African Americans in their place in society? And here William Garrison says that slaves ought to be instantly set free and brought under the protection of the law. And I feel like what he means by that is like, he's saying that after everything that they've been through, you know, like they a lot of people were not able to learn how to read, write, pretty much do anything other than work, like other than labor. So he feels like they should be free, instantly free, put under the protection, given homes, given like, you know what I mean, clothes, things of that nature, schools, stuff like that, because being stripped of your liberty for hundreds of years, that's a whole bloodline of people who don't know how to do anything in the real world. So I feel like that's what he mean by that. In their place in society, they don't really have one because they're at the bottom of the totem pole because of everything that they've been through. To continue on that point, I like this quote by Frederick Douglass where he say, "There is not a nation on the earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than those people of the United States," because he mentions the 4th of July and how in the Declaration of Independence it says we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, and he's asking what does that mean to a slave who endured the cruelty and the hardships that they went through, believing that all men are created equal, and that's obviously has not been true for the past since the past 100 years since that declaration was put in place. To him, he feels like it belittles the African Americans to the point where they feel like the what he says right here, he says to him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless, because the hollow mockery, the prayers and hymns, and with all your religious parade, it's a thin veil to cover up the crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages, which is what they consider African Americans. And I just think that's so sad in my opinion. But basically they had no place in society. Their place was to be workers. They brought people from Africa to America unjustly to have them strictly work. And if they didn't work, they were working without pay. And if they didn't work, they were beat. And it was just all bad. David Walker also mentioned the 4th of July as well. But he also asked another question, and that was, are we men? And he's referring to the fact that slaves and like the African Americans and the whites and any other race are equals under God, because that's what he talked about majority in his document, and that's gonna roll over to the next question. But he says, I ask you, oh my brethren, are we men? Did our Creator make us to be slaves to dust and ashes like ourselves? Are they not dying worms as well as we? He's referring to the whites who were enslaving them. Have they not to make their appearance before the tribunal of heaven to answer for the deeds done in the body as well as we? Have we any other master but Jesus Christ alone? Is he not their master as well as ours? What right then have we to obey and call any other master but himself? Like he's saying how they were calling the slave owner's master, but Jesus is the master. So that's just how I feel. I mean, that's just how I feel like he viewed African Americans in the society, of how he felt like white people viewed them in their society. And that goes into the last question that says, does religion factor into their perspective? And absolutely it does. It factors into all three of them, William, Frederick, and David's perspective, because I'm gonna start with David, and he says here David Walker gives his list of the he calls it a very imperfect list of cruelties inflicted on African Americans by the enlightened Christians of America. And he says first, basically he said first they will beat them to death if they find them praying to God, although they're supposed to be Christians themselves. It says they will hinder them from reading the Bible. They didn't allow them to read. They said they will make them suffer if they worship God together. They will bring them with hot iron. They cram bolts of fire into their throats. They cut us as they do horses, bulls, or hogs. And they chain and cuff them as if they're not even real people. You know what I mean? And after that, David gives his version of a perfect nation. In my opinion, that's what I think he's doing. Because he says, what nation under heaven will be able to do anything with us unless God gives us up into his hand? But he says, Americans, I declare you, while you keep children and men and women in bondage, we will not ever be together. Like the nation will never be together. But if they change their ways and treat them like men, that he says, we will be your friends, and there is no doubt in my mind that the whole of the past will sink into oblivion. and under God we will become united and happy people. Basically, he believes that the whites just don't think it's possible to live together, but his exclaim is that anything is possible with God. So he believes that our African American needs is a chance to live and incorporate into the world, and look where we are today. We made it through that, and not saying that the United States is even, but it's way better than it was back then, of course. But as for William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass, they also gave their points on God and how they felt like, of course, slavery was unjust and not righteous. But David Walker really gave the most points on it, and I feel like he was advocating more to get the whites to realize that what they're doing is ungodly than just wrong, because everybody knows it's wrong, but he wanted them to like really see how ungodly and how devilish that it is to have slavery, and like the way they were treating them especially. So yeah, but that was my discussion on the abolitionist movement of the 19th century, and